My name is Lena Whitaker. I'm 23 years old. And the strange thing about the moment your future quietly dies is that it almost never sounds dramatic when it begins. There's no music, no shattered glass, no perfect sentence hanging in the air like a warning from God. Sometimes it begins with rain against a window. Sometimes it begins in the half-dark of a dining room you've eaten in your whole life, with afternoon light slanting across the table in that soft way that makes everything look calmer than it really is. Sometimes it begins in a place that still looks like home, even while it is, very quietly, becoming something else. I remember exactly where I was sitting. The dining room table. My father's phone was face up on the wood, and I was alone in the room, waiting for him to come back from the garage. That's the part that still matters to me, maybe because it feels like evidence in my own defense. I was not snooping. I was not trying to find anything. I was just there in an ordinary moment, inside an ordinary house I had grown up in. Then the screen lit up. 4 words appeared in the preview before it went dark again. Grounds for divorce. Something inside my chest understood those words before my mind did. I picked up the phone. I shouldn't have, but I did. And the world I had spent 23 years living inside began to come apart so quietly that, if I hadn't been the one holding the phone, I might have believed later that I'd imagined it. I unlocked the screen. I don't know how long I sat there reading. 5 minutes. 20. Time became strange in the way it does when your body knows it has crossed into a version of life that does not go backward. What I remember most is that my hands weren't shaking. That surprised me later. Everything in me was falling, and my hands were still, perfectly still, just holding his phone, just reading, just watching the version of my family I had always believed in dissolve one careful sentence at a time. I want to be careful here, because this isn't only my story. This is my father's life. These are his wounds. I was only a witness to them, and not even on purpose. But I'm telling it because I have been carrying a very particular kind of anger for 8 months now. The kind with no clean target. The kind that hums under your ribs. The kind that follows you into sleep and sits with you when your phone rings and your mother's name lights up on the screen. She called me last week and told me again that my father had always been controlling, that he never let her breathe, that she had spent years shrinking herself inside that marriage. And I sat on the floor of my apartment with my back against my bed and said almost nothing. Because I know what I know now. And once you know a thing like that, it doesn't leave. My parents were married for 26 years. I have been alive for 23 of them, which means I have no memory of a world where they were not together. My father is the kind of man who fixes things, not in a showy way, not in a look what I built way, quietly, automatically. He notices what's broken and then, sooner or later, he repairs it. The screen door that squeaked for 2 years, the cabinet hinge in the hallway bathroom, the loose hem on my younger sister's graduation dress when mom was too busy to get to it. He once learned how to braid my sister's hair from a YouTube video because she wanted a complicated style for school picture day and our mother was out of town for work. He stood there in the kitchen, brow furrowed, fingers too large and too careful, trying again until it looked right. That's who he is. He is not a man who fills rooms with himself. He is a man who makes sure everyone else has what they need, then sits quietly enough that people forget how much he was doing in the first place. For a long time, I think that invisibility became part of the architecture of our family. Something my mother leaned on. Something she maybe stopped seeing. I don't want to turn her into a villain. I've tried very hard not to. She is my mother. I grew up with her laughter in the kitchen, with the smell of garlic and onions and whatever she was trying to improvise for dinner. With rides to soccer practice, late night studying at the dining table, movie nights where she cried at the endings and pretended she hadn't. With hugs at the front door when I left for college that lasted a second longer than usual, like she was trying not to let me feel how hard it was for her. Those things are real. They happened. They don't disappear just because I learned something ugly. But they sit differently now, heavier, tilted. Everything I thought I understood about my childhood has been very quietly retranslated into another language, and I'm still not fluent in it. Here is what I found on his phone that afternoon. I'm going to say it plainly because I have tried softening it in my mind and it never helps. My mother had developed feelings for her direct supervisor at the company where she had worked for 4 years. At some point in late spring, she had either told him or shown him somehow that those feelings existed. Before that, according to the email chain between my father and his lawyer, and according to my father's own written account, she had come to him with a request. She wanted to open their marriage. She framed it, my father wrote, as something she needed for her growth, her autonomy, her sense of self. She told him she felt constrained. She told him she needed room to explore what she was feeling. She said it wasn't about him. She said she still loved him. She said an open marriage could work if they both committed to honesty and communication. I read those lines 3 times. Not because I didn't understand them, because I did, and because I could not reconcile them with the life I thought I knew. My father, according to that same document, did not explode. He did not insult her. He did not accuse or threaten or humiliate. He sat with it for 3 days. That detail undid me, because that is exactly what he would do. He would take something devastating and private and impossible and sit with it like it deserved his full attention. He would turn it over carefully, as if truth were something you could reach by being patient enough with pain. After 3 days, he told her no. Not cruelly, not dramatically, just no. He said he could not be that person, that it wasn't in him, and that if she needed something he could not give her, then they would have to have a different and much harder conversation. According to his account, she told him she understood. She said she would let it go. She did not let it go. That is the part I still turn over in my mind like a sharp stone I cannot stop touching. She pursued it anyway, not with my father's knowledge, not with the honesty she had used to justify the request. She told the man at work how she felt, or showed him in some unmistakable way. The exact details weren't in the exchange I read, but the result was, he rejected her, professionally from what I could tell, firmly, without cruelty. He reported it to Human Resources. An investigation followed. The company concluded that the situation had created an uncomfortable work environment. My mother was fired. Not laid off. Not quietly pushed out in a restructuring. Fired. I remember staring at that word until it stopped looking real. Because when she had mentioned being between jobs a few weeks earlier, she had told me the company was restructuring. She had sounded tired but composed. I had said I was sorry. I had told her she would land somewhere better. She had thanked me like any mother accepting comfort from her daughter. And all the while, this was the truth sitting underneath it. My father, according to the documents, learned what really happened from one of my mother's former coworkers, a woman she had apparently been friendly with, someone who believed he deserved to know, especially after being asked to reorganize his entire marriage around what turned out to be a one-sided infatuation that ended in humiliation and termination. I don't know what that phone call was like for him. I only know the image my mind gives me when I try to picture it. My father standing very still, somewhere quiet, one hand against the counter maybe, absorbing the truth the way he absorbs everything, slowly, completely, without making a sound anyone else would hear. I was still staring at the phone when I heard the garage door, then his footsteps, then the soft shift of air as he stepped into the dining room. I looked up with tears already running down my face, and that was the moment before everything had to be spoken aloud. My father stopped when he saw me. Not abruptly, not with alarm in the cinematic sense. He just paused in the doorway, one hand still half curled like he had been about to set something down, and looked at me sitting there with his phone in my hand and tears on my face. For one suspended second, neither of us said anything. I think, even now, that part of him considered pretending none of it existed. Not because he was ashamed, because that was how he had always loved us, by stepping between us and whatever hurt he could reach first. Then he came forward, pulled out the chair across from me, and sat down. He didn't ask for the phone back right away. He didn't ask how much I'd seen. He looked at me, really looked at me, and said very quietly, "I'm sorry you saw that." Not, "I'm sorry this happened to me." Not, "I'm sorry your mother did this." Just, "I'm sorry you saw that." That sentence nearly broke me in half. It was such a him sentence. So instinctively selfless, it was almost unbearable. He was the one whose marriage was ending, the one whose life had been quietly split down the center, and his first response was sorrow that I had been made to know it. I started crying harder then, the ugly, breath-catching kind you can't stop once it starts. "I didn't mean to look," I said, which was a useless thing to say, but it was the only thing that came out. "I know," he said. His voice was steady, too steady. Like he had already used up the part of himself that could shake. I handed him the phone, but he didn't take it immediately. He let it sit between us on the table like a third truth neither of us wanted to touch first. "How long?" I asked. He knew what I meant. 3 weeks, he said. 3 weeks. I stared at him. "Why didn't you tell me?" He folded his hands together and looked down at them before answering. Because I was still trying to figure out how to hold it myself. There was a pause then. One of those silences so full it feels like another person in the room. Then he added, "And I didn't want to hand it to you before I could do that without dropping it. I don't think I had ever loved him more than I did in that moment. And I don't think anything had ever made me sadder." We sat there for hours. The rain moved in and out against the windows. The light shifted from afternoon gold into that flat, uncertain gray that makes a room feel briefly unmoored from time. At some point, I got up and turned on the lamp over the buffet because it was getting dark, and the act felt so normal that it made everything worse. He talked more that day than I think I had heard him talk in years. Not all at once. Not in one long speech. He spoke the way he always did, slowly, carefully, as though each sentence had to earn its place in the room. He told me about the conversation with my mother. Not the version from the legal notes. The real one. The human one. He said she had come to him on a Tuesday night after dinner. The dishes were still in the sink. She had asked if they could talk. At first he thought maybe she was unhappy at work again, or worried about money, or about my sister Ava, who was 20 and still in school and had been stressed about finals around that time. Instead, she sat down across from him and told him she had been thinking a lot about herself, about the life she had built, about whether she had lost pieces of who she was inside marriage, inside motherhood, inside years of doing what was expected. He said he listened. Of course he listened. He always listened. Then she told him there was someone at work she felt drawn to. Not that anything had happened. Not physically. But she wanted to be honest, she said. She wanted to explore what she was feeling. She wanted them to consider opening the marriage. He told me he remembered every detail of that moment with painful clarity. The sound of the refrigerator humming, the kitchen light over the sink, the way her hands were folded so tightly he could see the knuckles whitening. He remembered looking at the woman he had been married to for over 2 decades and feeling as though she had begun speaking a language he had never heard before. I thought maybe I'd misunderstood her, he said. I looked at him. Did you? He gave the smallest shake of his head. No. Then, after a moment, he said, I wanted to. That line lodged somewhere deep in me. Because that was the cruelty of it, maybe. Not only that she wanted something outside their marriage, but that she had placed the request in his hands like a moral exercise. Like if he was evolved enough, generous enough, emotionally expansive enough, he would find a way to say yes. He told me he had not answered immediately. He had told her he needed time to think. And then he did think. For 3 days. He asked himself whether he was being rigid, whether he was reacting out of fear, whether love, real mature love, was supposed to be more flexible than he had ever imagined. He said he even looked things up online late at night, articles and essays written by people who made it sound reasonable, enlightened, possible. And? I asked softly. And none of it felt true to me, he said. He didn't say it defensively. He didn't say it like a man clinging to pride. He said it like a person who had walked through every possible argument against himself and come out the other side with nothing but a plain fact. It wasn't in me, he said. That's all. He came back to her after 3 days and said no. Not because he wanted to control her. Not because he wanted to punish her. Because no was the truth. He told her that if she needed something outside the marriage, then they needed to talk honestly about what that meant. But he could not agree to pretend he was built for something he wasn't. She said she understood, he said. He looked at the table when he said that. Then he was quiet for a long time. I didn't interrupt. Finally, he said, the part I keep coming back to is that she asked me. I waited. He lifted his eyes to mine, and there was something in them I still have trouble naming. Not rage, not even disbelief anymore. Something more final than that. She looked me in the eye and asked me. I said no. And she did it anyway. His voice stayed level. That levelness was the most devastating part. So either the asking was never really asking, or my no just didn't count. I felt my whole body go cold. Because that was it. That was the piece I had not yet found words for inside myself. The asking made it worse. If she had betrayed him in secret from the beginning, that would have been one kind of wound. But asking him first, drawing him into a conversation about honesty, mutual respect, emotional growth, made it feel like she had staged sincerity before disregarding it. She had asked as though his answer mattered. And when the answer wasn't what she wanted, she had made it irrelevant. We sat there with that. At some point, I asked if Mom knew that he knew everything. He said yes. Not at first. At first, she had still tried to hold the layoff story together. But when he confronted her with what he had learned, the truth came out in fragments. Never all at once. Never cleanly. He didn't give me the full details of that conversation, and I didn't press. I think there are some humiliations children are not meant to inspect too closely, even when they become collateral damage. I asked if she was sorry. He was quiet for a while before answering. I think she's sorry it became what it became, he said at last. That answer told me more than a direct one would have. I stayed that weekend. Mom moved in and out of rooms the way she always had, asking whether I wanted tea, offering to make pasta, commenting on a sale at the grocery store, asking about my job in that bright, normal tone mothers use when they want family life to keep resembling itself. It was surreal. That word gets overused, but I don't know another one for the experience of watching someone pass you the salad while knowing they had detonated the emotional foundation of the house and were still narrating dinner like nothing beneath the table had cracked. I watched her differently after that. Every smile seemed to split into two versions, the one I had known all my life and the one now shadowed by what I knew. I hated that. I hated what knowledge was doing to her face and my mind. I hated what it was doing to mine. My father said almost nothing in front of her, not passive-aggressively, not coldly. He was just measured, polite, a little too careful, like a man moving around broken glass in bare feet while refusing to let anyone hear him bleed. Ava didn't know yet. She was upstairs half the time, on her phone or with headphones on, drifting in and out of the kitchen, complaining about coursework, asking if anyone had seen her charger. 20-year-olds still believe, in some tender corner of themselves, that the structure around them is holding unless someone clearly says otherwise. Dad had decided not to tell her until he had to, until the divorce proceedings required it, until silence became impossible. I respected that decision. Respecting it felt awful. There is a particular kind of pain in carrying a truth beside someone you love and watching them move through the world unprotected from it because the protection, for the moment, is the not knowing. Sunday afternoon, after lunch, I found my father at the kitchen sink washing dishes. Mom had gone upstairs. Ava was in the living room, laughing faintly at something on her phone. My father stood at the sink with his sleeves pushed up, hands in the water, rinsing a plate, and his shoulders looked wrong. That was the first thought that came into my head. Not poetic, not elegant, just wrong. He had always carried himself with a kind of quiet uprightness, not stiffness exactly, more like steadiness. But standing there in front of the sink, with the late light coming through the window over the counter, his shoulders were simply down, as if some invisible framework inside him had gone slack. He looked very tired. Not sleepy, not overworked, soul tired. I walked over and stood beside him without saying anything. After a minute, he handed me a towel. I took the plate he passed me and dried it. We stood there side by side in silence, washing and drying dishes like we had done 100 times before. And somehow that hurt more than the conversation at the table. Because grief doesn't always announce itself with tears or trembling voices. Sometimes it is just a father handing his daughter a wet plate because he still has to finish lunch cleanup in a life that has already fallen apart. He filed for divorce the following Thursday. No scene. No public outrage. No late-night calls to relatives demanding allegiance. He had a lawyer. He had a document. He had 3 weeks of grief already stored silently inside him. So he did what he always did when something needed doing. He moved forward, steadily, without announcement. The thing about quieted people is that when they finally stop hoping, it rarely looks dramatic from the outside. It looks almost identical to composure, until you realize composure can be a final form of heartbreak. I drove home Sunday evening. As I backed out of the driveway, I looked at the house in my rearview mirror and felt something in me shift with permanent force. The house was still there, the porch light, the trimmed hedge, the upstairs window in Ava's room, the kitchen where we had eaten lunch, the garage where Dad had been when his phone lit up on the table. Everything looked the same, and yet I understood, with a clarity so sharp it almost felt clean, that every version of home is temporary. Not in a bleak way, just in a true one. What you return to is never exactly what you left. And sometimes the thing you come back to is already gone before anyone has admitted it out loud. My father did not shout when his life changed. He did not slam doors. He did not demand witnesses. He simply closed one chapter of his life with the same quiet hands he had used to repair everything else. And somehow that made it harder to bear. 8 months have passed since that Sunday. Time didn't move the way I expected it to. There was no clean break between before and after. No moment where everything settled into a new, stable version of reality. Instead, it stretched. It thinned. It became something I had to walk through slowly, carrying pieces that didn't quite fit together anymore. My father lives in an apartment now, one of those complexes that tries a little too hard to look welcoming. Artificial boulders arranged near the entrance. A fountain that runs even in February like it's trying to convince you something is always alive here, even when it isn't. I've been there maybe a dozen times. He's made it his. Of course he has. Not with anything dramatic. Not with expensive furniture or bold choices. Just small, deliberate decisions. A decent coffee maker on the counter. 2 framed photographs on the wall. One of me and Ava when we were kids. One of a place I don't think he's ever told us about. A narrow bookshelf with the books he actually reads, not the ones that used to sit untouched in his office at home. The apartment is clean, quiet. It smells like him. The first time I sat on his couch, a second-hand one that dips slightly in the middle, I didn't cry while I was there. I waited until I got into my car. Then I cried for 20 minutes straight without entirely understanding why. Maybe because that was the first time it felt real in a way that couldn't be explained away as temporary. Not a phase. Not something that might still reverse itself if everyone just said the right things. This was his life now. And he was building it carefully, piece by piece, the same way he had built everything else. My mother is still in the house. That's part of the arrangement while everything gets finalized. She calls me every week. Same voice, same rhythm, same gentle insistence on normalcy. And the same story. The restructuring. The difficult work environment. The years of feeling unseen, unappreciated, emotionally alone. She has told this version of events so many times now that I think she believes it. Or maybe belief isn't the right word. Maybe it's the only version she can live inside. My aunt, her older sister, called me once, a few months ago. She spoke carefully, sympathetically, the way people do when they think they're helping you understand something complicated. She tried, my aunt said. Your mom tried for years. Your dad he's not very expressive. Some women need more than that. I sat there with my phone pressed to my ear and stared at the wall. There are moments when knowing the truth feels less like power and more like weight. I think it's complicated, I said. I have said that sentence so many times in the last 8 months that it has started to feel like a place I live inside. It's complicated. It means I know something you don't. It means I am not ready to break something open that cannot be put back together. It means I am carrying this carefully because if I drop it, everything changes. My sister Ava didn't know for most of those 8 months. Dad kept that boundary firm. He told me once, gently but clearly, that he wanted to be the one to tell her when the time came, that she deserved to hear it from him, not from a document, not from a stray comment, not from me trying to ease my own burden. So I carried it. I listened to Ava talk about Mom, about how stressed she seemed, about how unfair it was that she lost her job, about how maybe Dad could have been more supportive. I listened, and I said nothing. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from holding your tongue, not out of fear, but out of love. The kind that settles into your bones and stays there. My father doesn't talk about my mother unless I ask. Even then, he's careful. He chooses his words like they matter, like they could shape something fragile in me if he isn't precise. Your mom loves you, he said once when I asked how he was doing. That's the most important thing. I knew what he was doing. He was protecting my relationship with her, even now, even after everything. That kind of restraint is a form of love I don't think people talk about enough. But I can see the cost of it, in the pauses before he answers, in the way his eyes shift slightly, like he's looking at something just beyond the conversation. The loneliness in him isn't loud. It doesn't show up in late-night phone calls or emotional outbursts. It shows up in quieter ways. He told me once, almost offhandedly, that he doesn't know what to do with Saturday mornings anymore. I keep waking up early, he said. I always did. He used to make coffee, bring my mom a cup, start the day that way. And now? I asked. He gave a small shrug. Now I just get up. So he started walking. Long walks, he said, it helps. I went with him once. It was early spring, that in-between season where the air still bites, but there's something underneath it that feels like a promise. We walked for almost an hour. We talked about ordinary things. His work, mine, a book he was reading, a show I had been watching. Comfortable topics. Safe ground. Then we passed a bakery. A small place with fogged-up windows and a line that starts forming before 8 on weekends. He and my mom used to go there. I know that because I've been with them. I watched him as we approached it. He didn't stop. He didn't even fully slow. But there was a moment, a fraction of a second, where his pace shifted. Just slightly. Just enough that if you weren't looking for it, you might miss it. Then he kept walking, and I pretended not to notice. We kept talking about the book, but that moment stayed with me. Because grief isn't always a wave that crashes over you. Sometimes it's just a step that takes a little longer than the others. My mother sent him a letter. A long one. He told me about it a few days after it arrived. He didn't give me the details. Just that she had written to explain herself, to try to help him understand her side, to express regret for how things had unfolded. He held onto the letter for a while before mentioning it. Then one evening, I was at his apartment, and he set it on the kitchen table between us. We both looked at it. Neither of us touched it. Are you going to respond? I asked. He leaned back slightly, considering. I don't think so, he said. Because you're angry? I asked. He shook his head. No. There was a pause. Then he said, because I don't need anything from it. That answer landed somewhere deep. He explained it slowly, the way he explains everything that matters. He said he had spent months after the conversation about opening the marriage, trying to figure out if he had missed something, if there was some failure on his part that would make everything make sense, something he could point to and say, that's where it broke. I came up mostly empty, he said. Not completely empty. He admitted that he could be quiet, that he didn't always express things out loud, that maybe there were moments he should have spoken more, shown more, named things more clearly. But mostly, he said, trailing off, mostly there was nothing that justified what happened. And the letter, he continued, it feels like her trying to fill that space with a story. He looked at the envelope again. I don't need her story, he said. I need to live mine. He didn't say it with bitterness. He said it like a decision that had already settled into place. That was the moment I realized something had shifted in him. Not healed, not resolved, but clarified. The question of why had stopped being the center. And when that happens, something else begins. I thought again about what he had said that first day. She asked me. I said no. She did it anyway. That sequence has stayed with me more than anything else, because it wasn't just the betrayal. It was the illusion of choice, the performance of respect, the moment where he believed his answer mattered, and then learned that it didn't. If she had never asked, if she had simply gone and done it, it would have been one kind of pain. But she asked. She made it a conversation. She gave it the shape of honesty. And then she stepped outside of it. That is the part I still don't know how to forgive. My sister found out in February. I wasn't there when my father told her. He called me that night. His voice the same careful steadiness I had come to recognize as both strength and strain. It went about how I expected, he said, which I understood to mean she cried, he sat with her, and there was a long quiet afterward that neither of them tried to fill too quickly. Ava called me 2 days later. I remember seeing her name on my phone and feeling my chest tighten, not from surprise, but from the knowledge that something had finally shifted into the open. We talked for almost 2 hours. She didn't start with anger. That was what I had been afraid of. Not at me exactly, but that she would feel betrayed that I had known for so long and said nothing. She didn't. She sounded unsteady, like someone trying to walk across ground that kept changing shape under her feet. How long have you known? She asked. There was no accusation in it, just a quiet need for orientation. 8 months, I said. There was a pause on the other end, not a dramatic one, just long enough to feel. Okay, she said softly, and that was it. No anger, no blame, just sadness. I feel like she started, then stopped. Like what? I asked gently. Like I'm trying to remember our childhood, she said, and I don't know which parts are real anymore. That sentence stayed with me, because it named something I had been feeling but hadn't quite been able to articulate. There is a particular kind of grief in having to revise your own history. Not all at once, that might almost be easier, but slowly, piece by piece, memory by memory. You pick something up, a vacation, a holiday, a random Tuesday night, and you turn it over in your mind, holding it up to this new understanding, asking, does this still mean what I thought it meant? Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, and sometimes you can't tell why. I think some of it is still the same, I told her carefully. Not everything changes just because we know more now. She was quiet for a moment. I want that to be true, she said. Me too, I answered. After we hung up, I sat on my couch for a long time, staring at nothing. Because now it wasn't just me carrying the truth. Now it lived between us. Shared. Heavier in some ways. Lighter in others. My mother asked me, about a month later, if I blamed her. We were on the phone. She asked it in that careful, almost rehearsed tone people use when they are bracing for an answer. They're not sure they deserve to hear. I didn't respond right away. There are questions that don't have simple answers, no matter how much the person asking wants one. Lena, she prompted softly. I exhaled. I don't think blame is the right word, I said. That wasn't entirely true, but it wasn't entirely false either. I'm still working through it, I added. I love you. I just need some time. She went quiet. Then she said she understood. I'm not sure she did. Or maybe she understood exactly enough to know what I wasn't saying. I hope we can really talk about it soon, she said. Okay, I replied. After I hung up, I sat there thinking about what really talk might mean to her. Maybe she wants me to hear her side fully, to understand it in a way that makes what she did feel explainable. Justified, maybe. Or at least softened. But understanding why someone did something and having that understanding change how it lands are not the same thing. And I don't know if she knows that or if she's willing to know it. My father is different now. Not broken. Not in the way people imagine when they think of heartbreak. He still smiles. He still asks about my life. He still shows up quietly, consistently. But there's a version of his smile I remember from when I was younger. Loose. Unguarded. The kind that appeared without effort when something genuinely delighted him. I haven't seen that one in a long time. The smiles now are softer. Measured. Still real, but carrying something behind them. I hope the old one comes back someday. I really do. But I also understand now that some things don't come back in the same shape. They come back changed. He texted me last week. Just a simple message. You were right about that book. I had recommended it months ago. I stared at the message for a while before replying. Not because I didn't know what to say, because something about it felt like a small, quiet step forward. He's reading. He's walking. He's building something again. Not the same life, but a life. And maybe that's enough. There's a question I haven't been able to stop thinking about. My father gave everything he had to that marriage. Not perfectly. No one does anything perfectly. But fully. He was present. Faithful. Steady. He listened. He showed up. He told the truth, even when it cost him something. And it still wasn't enough. So what do you do with that? What do you do with the knowledge that you gave everything you were capable of giving, and it didn't hold? I used to think there had to be an answer. A lesson. A way to make it make sense. Now I think maybe there isn't. Maybe you don't do anything with it. Maybe eventually you just stop needing to. My mother has started talking about new beginnings. She mentioned casually a man she met through a friend. She said it lightly, like she was testing how it would land. I didn't react. I just said, and let the conversation move on. She let it go. My father isn't there yet. He's still in the part where everything is quieter, slower, more deliberate. He came over for dinner last Thursday. I made the pasta dish his mother used to make, the one he taught me years ago on a random weeknight that turned into a lesson without either of us planning it. He had 2 servings, washed his plate without being asked. Some things don't change. Before he left, he stood in the doorway for a moment looking at me in that familiar way, like he was checking if I was okay without wanting to make it a whole conversation. I'm okay, I said. He nodded. You're a good kid, he said. He's been saying that to me my entire life. It landed differently this time. Heavier, and lighter at the same time. I watched him walk to his car, watched the taillights disappear. Then I stood at the window for a while, looking out at the city moving the way it always does, indifferent, constant, full of other people's stories continuing without pause. My mother is already building her next chapter. My father is still learning how to be alone on Saturday mornings. And I am somewhere in between, holding both of them, loving both of them, understanding both of them in ways I never wanted to, and trying to figure out what a family is when the thing that held it together turns out to have been less solid than it looked. There's no clean ending to this. No moment where everything resolves into something neat and satisfying. He's still walking, still waking up early, still figuring out what to do with a life that no longer follows the map he spent decades drawing. I think there will be a Saturday morning eventually where it doesn't sting the moment he opens his eyes. I have to believe that. But she moved on months ago, and he is still finding the pieces she left behind. And if I'm being honest, so am I.